Hello and welcome to this video. I'm Arjun P. Sreeraj and I'm from 1BPSYHNCR. I'm going to brief about the history and systems of psychology and also talk about the renowned philosopher Karl Popper, his contributions to the development of psychology and his famous Principle of Falsifiability. So, firstly, the staple question prevalent even today is, why should we bother to study history, be it psychology or in general? But being a student of history of psychology, I can say for a fact that it is very essential to study the history of psychology. Psychology came from philosophy, and the various known and unknown contributions of a lot of philosophers and scientists have paved the way for the development of the vast disciple that is psychology. Here, I'll briefly talk about the famous philosopher Karl Popper, his life, his contributions and principles of psychology, and some of his theories. Sir Karl Raymond Popper was one of the greatest philosophers of the 20th century. He was an Austrian-British philosopher, academic, and a social commentator. Karl Popper changed the way we think about science. Scientific theories were thought to be tested by a process of verification. Popper showed that they could only be tested by falsification. If a theory can be falsified, he said, it counts as science. Otherwise, it is pseudoscience or simply outside the limits of science. His hypothetico-deductive model of the scientific method has largely replaced the older deductive and inductive methods. He was born on 20th July 1902 in Vienna and he passed away on 17th September 1994 at the age of 92 in London. He married Josephine Anna Henninger or Henny in 1930 and she also served as his amanuensis until her death in 1985. At an early stage of their marriage, they decided that they would never have children. In 1937, he took up a position teaching philosophy at the University of Canterbury in New Zealand, where he was to remain for the duration of the Second World War. He was brought up by two academically influenced parents. He was brought up in a very bookish family and he was influenced by his mother so much to learn music that he had initial plans to become a musician. He had even taken up music as his second degree for the PhD examination and eventually music led him to become a philosopher. He went to University of Vienna in 1918 where he was influenced by left-wing politics and he was a Marxist for some time. Around this time, he discovered the psychoanalytic theories of Freud and Adler and heard Einstein's lecture on relativity theory. The dominance of the critical spirit in Einstein and its total absence in Marx, Freud and Adler struck Popper as being of fundamental importance. Popper noticed that Freud and Adler couched their theories in terms that made them amenable only to confirmation, while Einstein's theory, crucially, had testable implications that, if false, would have falsified the theory itself. Next, let's go through his career path. Popper took some time to find his career. He trained to become a cabinet maker, obtained a primary school teaching diploma in 1925, and qualified to teach mathematics and physics in secondary school in 1929. He undertook a doctoral program with the Department of Psychology at the University of Vienna under the supervision of Karl Buehler, foundation of the Wurzburg School of Experimental Psychology. Karl Buehler was also a Kant scholar, that is, a professor in philosophy and psychology. Popper's project was initially designed as a psychological investigation of human memory on which he conducted initial research. However, the subject matter of a plant introductory chapter on methodology assumed a position of increasing preeminence and this resonated with Buehler, who, being a Kant scholar, had famously addressed the issue of the contemporary crisis in psychology. Later, under Buehler's direction, Popper switched his topic to the methodological problem of cognitive psychology and received his doctorate in 1928 for his dissertation. The annexation of Austria in 1938 became the catalyst that prompted Popper to refocus his writings on social and political psychology. He published The Open Society and Its Enemies, his critique on totalitarianism in 1945. In 1946, he moved to England to teach at the School of Economics in London and became a professor of logic and scientific method at the University of London in 1949. In later years, Popper came under philosophical criticism for his prescriptive approach to science and his emphasis on the logic of falsification. Popper was knighted in 1965 and retired from the University of London in 1969, remaining active as a writer, broadcaster, lecturer until his death in 1994. Now, let's take a look at his awards. Popper won many awards and honors in his field, including the Lippincott Award of the American Political Science Association, the Sonning Prize, the Otto Hahn Peace Medal of the United Nations Association of Germany in Berlin, and fellowships in the Royal Society, British Academy, London School of Economics, King's College London, Darwin College, Cambridge, Austrian Academy of Sciences, and Charles University, Prague. He received the Humanist Laureate Award from the International Academy of Humanism. He was knighted by Queen Elizabeth II in 1965 and was elected a Fellow of the Royal Society in 1976. He was invested with the insignia of a Companion of Honor in 1982. Talking about his contributions, Popper's principal contribution to the philosophy of science rests on his rejection of the inductive method in the empirical sciences. According to this traditional view, a scientific hypothesis may be tested and verified by obtaining the repeated outcome of substantiating observations. As the Scottish empiricist David Hume had shown, however, only an infinite number of such confirming results could prove the theory correct. Popper argued instead that hypotheses are deductively validated by what he called the falsifiability criterion. Now, I am going to brief about his works. First, he disagreed that the scientific activity starts with empirical observation. According to Popper, the older view of science implies that scientists wander around making observations and then attempting to explain what they have observed. He once gave pen and paper to a group of students and told them to observe and write down what they see. They asked him what they should observe. So clearly, the instruction observe alone is absurd. Observation is always selective. It needs a chosen object, a definite task, an interest, a point of view, or a problem. For Popper, scientific activity starts with a problem, and the problem determines what observations scientists will make. The next step is to propose solutions to the problems or conjectures, and then attempt to find fault with the proposed solutions or refutations. Popper saw the scientific method as involving three stages: problems, theories, and criticism. Principle of falsifiability. According to Popper, the demarcation criterion that distinguishes a scientific theory from a non-scientific theory is the principle of falsifiability. A scientific theory must be refutable. Contrary to what many believe, if any conceivable observation agrees with the theory is weak, not strong. Popper worked on criticizing the works of Freud and Adler by saying that their boundaries are vague. Whatever a person does can be seen as supportive of either of these theories without any exception, and Popper found that their boundaries are so vague that whatever happens, their verification can be claimed. Popper contrasted such theories with that of Einstein, which predicts precisely what should or should not happen if the theory is correct. Thus, Einstein's theory, unlike the theories of Freud and Adler and astrological predictions, was refutable and therefore scientific. Thus, for Popper, for a theory to be scientific, it must make risky predictions, predictions that run a real risk of being incorrect. Popper also criticized Freud and Adler by saying that their works were more focused on post-diction, that is explaining phenomena after they have already occurred, than in prediction. Whether due to vagueness or the emphasis on post-diction, these theories make no risky predictions and are in no danger of being falsified. They are therefore unscientific. According to Popper, it is a theory's incorrect predictions rather than its correct ones that cause scientific progress. In Popper's view, all scientific theories will eventually be found to be false and will be replaced by more adequate theories. It is always just a matter of time. For this reason, the highest status that a scientific theory can attain according to Popper is not yet disconfirmed. But he also mentions that if he finds any theory non-scientific, it does not mean that it's worthless or insignificant. Thus, Popper focused on the principle of falsifiability to distinguish between scientific and non-scientific theories and not between significant and insignificant theories. And with this, I would like to thank you for watching this video. Hope it was informational and helpful, and I would like to conclude this by saying that psychology is ever evolving and it's a very interesting field to deal with. So, read more about psychology, research more about psychology, and resolve more things in psychology. Thank you.